Hi, I'm Robert Wright. I run the Non-Zero Foundation, which produces all the shows on Blogging Heads TV and Meaning of Life TV. We host a variety of voices, some of them pretty unorthodox, and we encourage dialogue that is sharp but civil. We think fostering constructive conversation is especially important now that America and the world are looking kind of fragile. If you agree that our mission is important, I hope you'll consider helping us shoulder the cost. You can do that by becoming one of our cherished patrons at patreon.com/nonzero foundation. That's NONZEROFOUNDATION. Thanks. We need your help, and we deeply appreciate it.
Hello, Bill.
Good morning, Matt. As you can see, I've changed the decor.
It's hot. That is a sexy background. It looks like do you have someone like tied up to the radiator just off camera?
So the DMZ, Northern DMZ.
Oh, he doesn't answer. I love that. Just move past it. Nothing to see here, people. It's not like there's a conspiracy that elites are doing all sorts of horrific things in basements.
I'm in my mother's basement. So this is because school started. School starts this week in Northampton. It's remote only. And we're having an older daughter in part of a small group of kids with caregiver sharing. So the kids are at our house once a week, and they're at other people's houses other days of the week. And Wednesday is a independent study day.
I love it. It's like homeschooling.
What it is? This is more like school than the spring.
Yeah.
The spring was like, real half-assed homeschooling.
This is like a crunchy conservative thing you're doing, man. It's your little platoon, your little community is just taking responsibility. I'm sure this is not sanctioned. It's
no, they're still in public school.
I know. I know.
So they're still on the Zooms with their teachers. Yeah. They're just in a room with 3 other kids, and who are on different Zooms. They're not even in the same class.
I love it. This is great.
And my younger daughter is, instead of having her stay at home, she is at my mother's upstairs.
Yeah.
And I am in the basement. So
it's really good you got to keep them separated. It's really good to separate the kids, and because you've got 2, I've got 2, and at some point they sort of talk about we, like it's like they don't have individual identities, and then there's fighting, and I think it's good to separate them and spend a little time alone with them as well.
Well, I think it's been useful to have them both have to go somewhere.
Yes.
It's good for sort of getting the day started on the right foot, and it's not just a regular day in the house where I don't have to listen to what my parents are saying. Like there's a schedule, there are teachers, you have to log on at a certain time, and you have to go someplace to make sure you do that on time.
There's a psychological thing, and I too, working from home, occasionally will force myself to get up 9, 10 and put on pants. It's healthy. It's productive, so I think it's a smart idea. It's a psychological switch.
So I don't know how well other parents across the country are doing with schools. I guess I haven't seen in the media, big scandals. There's been the occasional story about certain schools that are in person having small outbreaks and having to shut things down. But it hasn't been the story of September yet. But there still is time, I think, for the whole school situation to get pretty haywire between now and election day.
It seems like colleges a little bit here and there, but not with kids. So, then there is, I think kids are probably not as susceptible, or it's not as bad for them. But you've also got high schoolers going, right? So,
here in Northampton, the Northampton Public School District is all remote until at least November 3rd. The vocational school it is hybrid. So you have kids in person. I think like half of the student body is in school on a given day. So we're running a little bit of an experiment here. If there is an outbreak at the vocational school, that's going to be very controversial because it's a very liberal town. People are wearing their masks. That's sort of the one that's the most aggressive action someone has taken to get beyond the current status quo, and we'll see how well that plays.
We shall. And I think if they want to hurt Trump, they would push. Who knows what the rationale is? But I think there was an assumption maybe that there was going to be chaos, and there may not be. The school part of it may, knock on wood, and I'm rooting for Trump's success with the schools because for purely selfish reasons. Because number one, I don't want people to get sick, but number two, I want my kids out of the house. Wasn't there a Bill Cosby joke? He would talk about like how his goal was not. No, maybe it was Fred Thompson or it was some old politician that said the American dream isn't home ownership, it's living long enough to move your kids out of the house.
I don't remember.
Whatever the case may be, I want them in school, happy and healthy. And Bill, whatever you're doing in that dungeon you call a basement is also your business. Just remember we're friends, and I love you dearly.
I hear my child bounding down the stairs. I don't know if that means that I need to be doing something or if she's just taking a movement break, but we'll see. Anyway, what is your sense of where the race stands? We're Thursday, we're mid-September. Trump has had his deals with the UAE and Bahrain. He had the ABC town hall. Biden is lacerating him on being missing in action on coronavirus still.
Big Ten college football's back, baby.
College football's back. Trump is trying to take credit for that. Is Trump at all better off this week than last week?
Well, look, I think the Middle East deal was a big deal for a variety of reasons, but I don't think it matters much because I don't think Trump got the attention that it deserved. I mean, two Arab countries doing a peace accord essentially with Israel is a big deal, but you wouldn't know it by the press coverage, which I think was much more focused on, hurricanes and wildfires and a town hall meeting that Trump, for some reason, decided to have that same night on ABC News. So this is a long way of saying that I don't think much has changed. I really feel like we are in this weird scenario where there's only a sliver of the population that is persuadable, that is really going to decide this election. And you have to fight really hard to try to win over a small percentage of Americans who are still, persuadable. That's kind of where I think we are. So it means that like anything could matter, but most things don't matter.
We talked earlier in a past show about Alan Lichtman and the 13 keys, which
yes,
the election modelers deride as not being statistically grounded, data grounded. And here's an example with the UAE and Bahrain deals where there is some subjectivity in the Lichtman model. One of his keys is their major foreign policy success. Right. Now, the way he describes it in his book is that something that, I forget not having the exact wording in front of me, but it's like really big, really, really dramatic, affects U.S. national interests. Now, if you listen to the Trump campaign spin of it, it would absolutely qualify. This is one of the greatest agreements of all time. This is bringing peace to the Middle East.
I think on paper this does qualify. I mean, what has happened in the past 20 years that is more, like, on paper significant in terms of peace than this?
I don't know, the Iranian nuclear deal.
Well,
but this
we
is
could
the
differ
point.
on.
Well, people differ on these
but
things.
even assuming, let's assume that you're right. Okay, that's one. I mean, you know.
I mean, we were in a bigger state of acrimony with Iran. The nuclear deal was meant to alleviate. We were not in any kind of friction with Bahrain or UAE. These are, while very dictatorial, moderate Arab regimes in the spectrum of things. You can make an argument that these are important building blocks towards an eventual peace agreement with the Palestinians. Perhaps in a harsh sense, we're gonna divide and conquer. We're gonna tell the Palestinians the rest of the Arab world doesn't have your back, and you're gonna have to come crawling for a much weaker deal than you thought you were gonna get 10 years ago. But clearly, the White House argument as this is an amazing deal, this is putting us in the path to peace. Precisely because it's going to isolate Iran. It's going to unite the Sunnis against Iran and put them in their place, going in the opposite direction of what Obama was trying to do with the Iranian deal. And my reaction is I'm worried this is going to exacerbate that Sunni-Shia tension, that Arab-Persian tension, and it's not going to end up being very peaceful at all. To your point earlier, it's not getting a ton of media attention. So from the Lichtman perspective, maybe it doesn't qualify because the average person doesn't see it as that big of a deal. So I'm just saying there's a lot of subjectivity here. I do think it makes sense for Trump. It makes more sense for Trump to do positive things to argue, I am bringing calm and stability to the world, as opposed to leaning into more chaos, more disruption, more insanity. People are always worried, what crazy things is Trump going to do between now and Election Day? Could be a lot, but the rational thing for Trump to do is to not be crazy and to find more
Jimmy
deals
Carter
to do.
The Camp David Accord. I remember some picture of, was it Carter or Bill Clinton and Yasser Arafat doing this weird, like, handshake like this?
I think the weird handshake was Carter and Camp David, the weird 3-person handshake.
Okay,
Clinton,
so then Bill Clinton
had Arafat and
right. I feel like that got a lot more positive press.
Clinton's initial agreement was early in his administration. I think it was 93, if I remember correctly. He didn't have the ultimate failure. Because Rabin got killed. So he had Rabin and Arafat early. That was Oslo. And that had a lot of hope attached to it. But then it petered out by the end of the second term when he didn't get the big deal done. Carter got the big deal with Egypt in the Camp David Accords, but that was 78, and no one really cared by 1980. Carter also had the Panama Canal Treaty, which got huge conservative backlash, as seen as America weakening its standing in the world, but actually was a good deal and a fair deal in the big scheme of things. So I mean, I don't disagree with Lichtman that there should be a foreign policy line, there should be a foreign policy key. But there is inherent subjectivity to calculating its weight, and I do think that I'm more skeptical of putting a big foreign policy success on the same plane as a domestic policy success, because the average American cares more about domestic than foreign. So a late foreign success. In this case, with two countries that most Americans don't even know exist, that strikes me as a hard place to hang your hat for a game changer.
No, I think that's true. From a political standpoint, what I'm doing is sort of a media critique here. This story did not, it was sort of buried the next day, to be honest with you. That's my
Well, I didn't fully consume all media to try to really quantify how true that is. I tend to check in on CNN between roughly 4:30 and 6:30 because that's when I'm making dinner, and I listen to it on my Amazon Echo. They were talking about on CNN. I mean, they spent a lot of time on.
We love CNN here. Bill.
They had Kushner on. They had Tom Friedman following Kushner talking about it, and Tom Friedman was saying mostly nice things about it. So he got that much at least. But it's hard when there's a lot of other news. I mean,
well, I also think just Trump has obviously poisoned the well. I mean, it's hard to give Trump a lot of credit, even if he does something good, because he has created so much chaos and instability. And in some ways,
the wildfires are a big story.
Broken the media.
Ongoing pandemic, and all the competing information and misinformation with the vaccine's a big story. I mean, Trump's his own enemy here. He steps on his own good news by doing lots of things that create bad news for him.
I think that's true. Basically, I guess to sort of bring it around to where we started, I think that there's been a lot of developments. I don't know how much anything matters. I don't know how much the Atlantic story matters. I don't know how much, I don't think this Middle East deal matters at all politically, and despite the fact that I think it substantively is a big deal. All these scandals that break, I don't know how much any of them really are moving the needle. We've got 3 debates coming up. There could also be some sort of a black swan event or some sort of an October surprise. But it feels like this is like a fight over, a fight of inches. And I think I'm just in general, Bill, doing this with you every week, I think I'm probably more scared is the wrong word. I think you are confident that Joe Biden is going to win and that he's winning. And I will grant you that by every metric that one could look at, objectively, Biden is winning. But I am not comfortable with that lead. I can tell you that. I would not write off Trump. This is weird. And you've got these crazy QAnon people that I think are just part of the story, is that you're not going to change their minds. I guarantee you on that. Well, not that they're a majority. But
I do want to talk some Q with you.
Yeah.
But you look in the national polling, Biden's having a bit of a sag right now. He's actually, when I last checked this morning, he was just a hair below 6 on RCP's average, and he was under 7 in the 538 average. For folks who aren't following super clearly, Real Clear Politics has been doing the polling averages for a very long time, but they get knocked because they don't include every poll. Some people say they take on some right-leaning polls like Rasmussen and Trafalgar, and they don't include some other polls that are more Democratic friendly, and that skews the average. 538 takes literally every poll. They don't care where it comes from, but they adjust them based on they give them pollster ratings. So if you're an A poll, you get more weight than if you're a C poll. They gauge House effects. So a Rasmussen poll, the Republican lean, that gets sort of factored in, and then they make adjustments to that. I think there's, critiques to make about any of these setups. Their numbers are pretty similar. I mean, they have been identical. There's been moments when RCP has been a little bit more Biden-friendly than 538. Right now, 538's a little bit better than RCP. But they're both showing a bit of a sag over the past couple weeks. But that has to be gauged alongside of the state polling. I actually find national polling, generally speaking, of higher quality than state polling. I'm not a guy who says, forget the national polls, it's all the Electoral College. Well, yeah, but if you can see a national trend going, you want to factor that into the more spottier, sporadic state polling that you get. Biden and Wisconsin is pretty solid. There's been a lot more Wisconsin polling this time around than 2016, and Biden has not been under 6 I think he's over 6 in the average right now in Wisconsin. He's over 6 in Michigan. He's around 4 or 5 in Arizona and Pennsylvania. Florida has tightened from where it was. There was some earlier polling that it seemed like Biden was about to run away with Florida, and now it's more like 1 or 2. But you're not seeing a lot of volatility in the state polling generally.
Yeah.
So even though there's a bit of a national sag, it's not translating into certain states actually flat out tipping over and becoming Trump states. So I don't really, at the moment, I'm not taking this as any kind of serious, pivot point in the race. That feels more just like a bit of the general fluctuation and noise that we've seen and overall stability. I mean, Biden's been at +6 before. He had him in +6 in the past month or so.
Yeah. It seems like Trump has, those people that he could shoot on Fifth Avenue. You could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and they would stick with him. It's a pretty good chunk of people. It's not a majority.
Well, I think it's why you don't see Biden running away with it. We're
right.
not likely to have a 1980. You could have a 1980 situation. I mean, it's not going to be a 1984 situation where it's just a total sweep of the map, because you've got this pretty hard 40% plus that seems really hard to move. And they're all Q supporters, but they're pretty hardcore.
These are people who part of it is they don't believe the news. They just literally do not believe the news, or they will rationalize anything for Trump. And so they're not movable, right? So Biden is probably more susceptible to losing people if something came out about Biden or if he made a mistake. Whereas I think with Trump, he is where he is probably. And so I wonder about these debates. We've got 3 debates coming up in a couple of weeks now. And
less than 2 weeks for the first one.
So is this, obviously you never know, but how important do you think these debates are going to be?
As far as the opportunity for a game changer for Trump, he's running out of time. We're less than 50 days at this point. I think we're 40, 46 now. Something's got to seriously change. I don't think a slight sag in the national lead is nearly enough for where the position Trump is in. As I've said on past shows, no incumbent has ever come back from this far behind. So he needs something big. A really disastrous debate for Biden would be potentially big. Now, I agree with you that Trump's base is probably more locked in than Biden's base. Biden has a broader, thinner, pool of support. But Biden's also not a fresh face. So he's had his gaffes. You have the Trump campaign steadily trying to take any little flub and turning it into an argument about cognitive decline, and that stuff hasn't worked. So,
did you see there was a video where Biden was like asking his staff, "Well, where are we tomorrow?"
Right. What are we doing? What are we doing?
Well, and it's like, well, we're in Florida tomorrow.
Right.
And that seems crazy. If you're a normal person and you don't know where you're going to be tomorrow, that may seem crazy. If you're in a presidential race, that would be completely normal to not necessarily know what state you're going to be in.
Right.
We know the joke, "Hello, Cleveland." Part of it is that they were probably high, but part of the joke is that they're on tour every night. They're in a different town.
Right. So. Though Biden, I'm tracking this.
Yeah.
Biden's travel is insanely light.
Yeah, that's true.
So,
true.
I'll try to pull it up quick.
Well, he's he's in his basement in Delaware.
This is pretty darn close to an old school front porch strategy.
Porch campaign, yeah.
And the few states that he has traveled to are not the reach states.
Yeah. I tell you, Bill, I wonder if we're going to look back. This is what I'm, contemplating. Like, are we going to look back and say, like, he wasn't really running hard. He needed to hustle, and he didn't. He wasn't running like his life depended on it, or like our lives depended on it.
Well, if he loses,
well, yeah. But
sure, people are going to say that. Sure,
but it'll be a pretty legitimate criticism. Like, don't you think if you're running for president, you should be at this point hustling a little bit?
Well, look, Biden won Super Tuesday without the money advantage, without the field team advantage. He won states they didn't show up in. He won states they had very few field offices in. And I argued at the time that was an indication that some of the things that we think are important aren't important. You know, free media is a lot more important.
Bill,
What's that?
This leads us to an email we got from DZ Man.
Yeah, before we'll get to that, but I just want to say this one thing. So I have this is the data. So since both conventions ended, so that's been about a little more than 2 weeks. Biden has been to Pennsylvania 3 times, Florida once, Michigan once, counting tomorrow, Minnesota once, and Wisconsin once. And these are the places that he's not been to at all. Arizona, Georgia, Maine second, Nebraska second, Iowa, Nevada, North Carolina, Ohio, and Texas. Now, I think we're about 46.
I think we just wrote your next column. I mean, this is, are you like, has this been written, or are you looking it up just on the?
Well, I mean, I tabulated that myself.
Okay. So you need to write this, man.
Maybe.
But I think, unfortunately, you're going to write it doesn't matter. But I think we may look back and say this is, this is just insanity. I mean, this is political malpractice.
Well, the critique, if I was in the Biden inner circle, if they made a decision, look, we're not going to win this thing through a lot of personal travel. It's not safe to do. People understand that's not safe to do, so it's okay to be light. I accept that. If my thinking was I don't need to do a ton of rallies to win, I would, where I did go, I would have a different strategy behind it. Why not go to Omaha? Why not go to Texas? Why not flex and say I'm going to signal how broad my campaign is. I would go to Montana to help Steve Bullock. I would go to South Carolina to help Jamie Harrison. I would try to send the message that we are going to unify this country in full. And not do this very, very narrow. It's not even swing state at this point. I mean, they should have said screw Minnesota. Minnesota's practically in the bag at this point. Most polls are 8 + 9. There was a +16 that came out this week. So I don't think he needs to be in Minnesota. So no, maybe that will switch. Maybe as you get into October, he'll hit some of these states.
Well, I mean, we're running out of time.
I'm counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 7 states and 2 districts that he's not touched at all, and we have less than 7 weeks left.
All right, if you don't write this, I'm going to write it and credit Bill Scher. But you need to pitch this.
I get to pitch it first before you steal it.
You need to pitch it. It's a great idea, and I love. Not only is it, that you're providing some data. But I like your theory about, showing that we're not going to run the kind of campaign that just focuses on 5 swing states. We're running to be president of the United States of America, and you can be of service instead of just promoting yourself. Go help other people. And look, I know the local news media isn't as vibrant as it once was, but if Joe Biden goes to San Antonio, that's going to get some press. That's going to get local TV coverage and newspaper coverage. And I mean, it's going to make a splash in that area. I don't think it could hurt unless he falls off the stage.
And I think, those 2 states in particular, MJ Hagar has very low name ID in Texas. So you might think, look, to win a redder state, you don't want the candidate too tethered to the Democratic top of the ticket. You want some separation and show that you kind of a few ticks to the right of the nominee. In this particular case, because Cornyn is well below 50 in some polling, so he's soft, and Hagar's just not well known. So give her that shot of free press with the joint appearance and see if you can boost her up. Now, South Carolina, I've been a huge South Carolina Senate skeptic.
This is where Lindsey Graham is running for re-election.
Correct. Because there was some polling that showed it close in the summer, but I was like, look, it's close nominally, but Jamie Harrison's still in the low 40s. South Carolina has not elected a Democrat statewide to anything in 22 years. I think with the lone exception of like superintendent of education, 18 years ago. I mean, I'm not big on Amy McGrath, but I was like, at least Kentucky elected a Democratic governor last year. There's some indication that Democrats can play. You don't have that in South Carolina. So how is Jamie Harrison, an African-American Democrat, going to win in a state that's been pretty hardcore Confederate for a long time? I didn't see that math adding up. Now, you have a Quinnipiac poll this week that has it not just tied, but tied 48-48.
Well, I mean, Lindsey's acting like he's taking it seriously too.
He's taking it seriously.
Did he challenge into some debates or something? That's not. Lindsey did something that I forget what it was, but it's not the kind of thing that you do if you are a safe incumbent.
Oh, he's definitely running seriously. But the other thing that struck me about that South Carolina poll, granted, it's one poll. Like, I'm not going to say 48-48 in one poll means, boom, it's close. I want to see Harrison in those upper 40s in several polls before I really think this could happen. But Biden's only behind 6 points in South Carolina. I mean, that's wild. I mean, South Carolina is closer than Michigan.
Wow.
Not that I think Biden's going to win it, because I think getting that last 6 it would be very difficult. But Biden could go to South Carolina and not be a millstone around Harris's neck, probably. Now, granted, Harrison probably needs some Trump-Harrison voters to get over the finish line. But I think Harrison could I think Biden could go to Harrison, hey, do you want me to come? I think Harrison would say yes.
I think it would be a way for Biden to generate some excitement and energy. And look, here's the thing. I don't think either of us would recommend that Biden do what Bob Dole did, which is stay awake for like 72 hours and barnstorm the nation. Yeah. Seems like a bad idea. Not only was it a move of desperation, but mistakes happen when you're fatigued and all that. I would err toward resting Joe Biden and prepping for the debates.
Well, I think that's what's happening here.
It's a smart move, right? Spend a lot of time prepping for the debates. But I think you could do some of this stuff without overexerting the campaign. You know what I'm saying? It's not that hard to do.
Well, when he is traveling, it's not 24-hour schedule. You're dropping in for an event or two and going back home.
I mean, you're flying private. You can. It's not. You're not going to burn a couple days. Waiting for a connecting flight in Atlanta or something.
But if there's one thing that's more important than anything else, is having a pretty good first debate. Biden doesn't have to knock it out of the park, but he has to be prepared. He can't do something wildly terrible. I mean, Biden can gab. Biden's gaffed plenty of times in debates, and he's still here. And incumbents tend to have bad first debates. I talked about this back when Obama had the bad first debate against Mitt Romney. It's pretty normal for the incumbent president to have a bad first debate.
Big time.
Bit out of practice. Got to defend a record.
It happened to Reagan. It happened to Obama.
That's right. And George Bush never had great debates against John Kerry. John Kerry won the opinion polling out of all those debates.
Hey, do you remember the conspiracy theory about George Bush had like a listening device?
Yep.
Whatever happened to that?
That was silly. But I remember, don't forget Poland. It's kind of like, don't forget Bahrain. That's what Trump was trying to. That's what Bush was trying to hang his hat on.
There was a photograph of Bush taken from behind where it looked like there was like a cable underneath of his jacket.
He probably had some kind of earpiece. Doesn't mean that Carl was whispering in his ear.
Doesn't mean he wasn't.
So we had a request from one of our super fans.
Yes. Is this DZ Man?
DZ Man. he had a series of questions, but it was along the lines of, how well is the Trump campaign being run, the nuts and bolts of it, and how much is that going to matter? We had a shift. He had to get rid of a campaign manager. He got rid of Brad Parscale and brought on Bill Stepien. We've had reports that Trump has been profligate in his spending on the campaign, and now they're having to be judicious in where they run ads. They're pulling ads in some states, which Stepien is saying, well, we're just going to target the early voting states, as the early voting begins, and we're not going to waste money on these other states, which strikes me as pretty thin spin. You got 7 weeks. There's no state where you're wasting your money running an ad. If you had the money, you'd be spending it there. I don't think that Trump is losing because the campaign is showing signs of the wheels coming off. It's probably more that the campaign is losing because of Trump's performance in office, and that's putting stress on the campaign. That's on the nuts and bolts of the campaign. But I do think the Trump campaign tried to sell itself as being a real juggernaut, with Brad saying he had a Death Star going, and people weren't watching the spending, and now they're having to make some tough choices that they shouldn't have to make. The whole point of having a ton of money is so you can spread the map and not have to make tough choices. You blow it on consulting and legal bills, then you have to make those tough choices anyway.
Totally. I think Stepien's an upgrade over Parscale. But having said that, I think in general, a well-run campaign managers, they probably can impact 3 to 5% of a race. There are, even in a congressional race, there are just environmental factors, and then there's just the candidate's likability and all that. So I think that people who work in campaigns, people who are strategists and operatives, have to believe that what they do makes a difference. Because why else would you get up in the morning if you didn't think it mattered? And again, I think it does matter. I think a well-run campaign, could probably boost maybe 5%, right? And that in most races, that's enough.
You think five? You're saying 5 points? 5 points in the race?
I would say in like a congressional race, let's say, like a House of Representatives race, the difference between a really well-run campaign that identifies likely persuadable voters, raises money, targets those likely persuadable voters using voter contact methods, works to actually turn them out on election day. I think that does make a difference. Now, I don't think it takes you from being a zero to being a winner. But I think that it does make a difference. But in a presidential race, I think it matters less. And when it comes to Trump, I think it matters much less, right? Donald Trump cannot be managed. You're not going to script Donald Trump. And so I would say that, I think Stepien is an upgrade, but at the end of the day, it's going to be about this election is going to be about Donald Trump. It's not like, oh, I got this really nice voter mail piece that changed my mind, or someone knocked on my door and asked me to vote for Trump, or I saw a billboard or a yard sign and now I'm going to vote for Trump, or even I saw a TV ad. Like, in a House race where you've never heard of the candidates or you're not paying that close attention, if someone knocks on your door, that could have an impact. I think this race, the amount of difference that a well-run campaign versus a poorly run campaign is very at the margins. It's Donald Trump. You like Donald Trump or you hate Donald Trump kind of thing.
Do you think Donald Trump does an ABC town hall with uncommitted voters where he doesn't control who those uncommitted voters are, does that happen if Brad Parscale is still running things and not Bill Stepien?
Yeah, I think so. First of all, I don't think that town hall was a disaster. Trump put himself out there. He did a lot of lying and exaggerating. I don't think there was like a moment where, the George H.W. Bush looking at his watch and talking about how the debt personally affects him, while Bill Clinton comes out and says, "I feel your pain." I don't think Trump had a bad night. I think it was probably just a wasted opportunity. I mean, I give him credit for putting himself out there and not hiding in his basement. On the other hand, he probably did step on, not that the media was going to cover his Middle East peace deal, but this was one more reason they didn't have to. But I think Donald Trump does what Donald Trump wants to do, and I don't think Stepien.
You don't think there was a tactical shift Pascal has seemed to me analogous to the way Trump has behaved for the last 2.5 years as running a base-only campaign.
Yeah.
And this is the first thing the Trump campaign has done, with the exception of, the disingenuous play for black voters. Yeah. I think the ABC 10 Hall is the only thing that the campaign has done, which is designed to go beyond the base and try to connect with
I think it's ridiculous to think you can control Donald Trump. I mean, the only way to control Donald Trump is if he doesn't know that the media invitation has been proffered. I mean, apparently the reason that Trump didn't sit down with Bob Woodward, the first book, Fear, I think it was called, was because Kellyanne Conway didn't tell Trump that the invitation was being proffered. Right. But I think the notion that you are as a campaign manager going to have the authority to make these sort of decisions, whether Trump goes on TV or not, I think is just.
Well, it's possible it wouldn't get to his desk, that Pascale wouldn't have brought that to his attention.
Pardon me?
It's possible, I think, that Pascale wouldn't have brought that request to his attention.
Yeah, that's the only way that it would have. That it might have happened.
Trump's MO is to be on TV, however it happens, and with whoever is in the room.
By the way, I'm reminded of if you ever read Ed Rollins' book Bare Knuckles in Back Rooms, he talks about when he was helping manage Ross Perot's race, and he just turned on CNN and like Ross Perot, his candidate was like on Larry King or something, and he's like. He told Ross, he's like, I'm not trying to run a conventional campaign. I'm trying to run a campaign. Like, I need to know if you're going to be on TV.
Yeah, so, I mean, my sense is that this was a strategic shift in the campaign that Stepien is behind. And it's like, it makes sense on paper. Trump is behind and should go beyond his base. Yeah. His base probably won't save the day. But it doesn't seem there's a whole lot of thinking through about what that's going to entail. Now, Trump's, when I the part that I saw the second half of it. Okay. I thought Trump kept his cool.
Yeah.
He didn't berate.
Remember the African American woman who was, talking to him, and I thought she asked him a tough question, and I thought that he responded as diplomatically as Donald Trump can.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that.
And his answer was pretty much bullshit, but that's what you do that's called staying on message, especially if you don't have a good, like, if you have nothing, if you can't say something honest that is helpful, like the best move is to do what he did in that scenario. I don't think it was I don't think it hurt him, and I think it might have potentially on the margins helped him a little bit, but it's probably just a waste of time, to be honest.
Well, the problem for him is, one, the ratings of the event itself weren't that great, so I'm not sure how many uncommitted voters watched it. And the news out of it, the clips that you see on TV are the confrontations, and I don't think you got the best of Trump, even though Trump didn't do anything, horrible from a performative standpoint. Yeah. Still, getting beat on by uncommitted voters is not a great look when you're the incumbent.
I don't know. Trump has changed everything we think we know about politics, and Trump being feisty may help him with some people. Now, you could say he already has their vote anyway. Like if they're rooting on Trump fighting with an average voter. But it's him, in a way, it's him versus the media, if you think about it. Not the average voter, but the media who handed the microphone to that quote unquote average voter.
See, if I was Trump, I'd be doing I'd be taking the Bahrain model. I'd be doing the stimulus deal. I mean, you saw the tweet that Trump had where he's saying Democrats are heartless, Republicans boost your numbers. I mean, he's basically telling Republicans, give in to Nancy Pelosi so I can sign a bill and give money to people. Which I think is the right impulse for him. He should do that. And he should call up Kim Jong-un and say, hey, buddy, do me a solid. You see what Bahrain's doing for me? Give me the big deal. Give me the big nuclear deal. That's what I think he needs to have more wins.
Don't be surprised. I mean, it could happen, man.
I mean, that to me, I think the small ball. Let's do ads with Lobsterman in Maine 2, and do uncommitted town halls. Like that to me is not thinking big enough to change the frame of this.
Well, there is I will say this. I mean, I don't know what the grand strategy is, or if it's just playing, being reactionary and responding to requests. But earlier you were talking about how Joe Biden is not going anywhere, and he's not. I mean, Joe Biden is not that available to the press either. And when they do have a chance to talk to Joe Biden, they ask him a lot of softball questions. And here Donald Trump is subjecting himself to a pretty hostile environment. And so maybe there's a case to be made that Trump is willing to talk to anybody and take on, diverse viewpoints, and Biden is hiding in the basement.
Biden is running a classic campaign against an incumbent designed to keep the attention on the incumbent and make it a referendum on the incumbent, especially when the incumbent is unpopular.
He's also running a prevent defense, which, as they say in football, it prevents you from winning, right? So I'm sure, for those who aren't familiar with the idea, when you're winning or you think you're winning, instead of being aggressive, you try not to lose and you play it safe. And I'm starting to think that that's what Biden's doing. And I get nervous when I'm watching the Washington football team and they start playing a prevent defense because they always blow it when they do that. It's one of the most dangerous things you can do. One of the most risky things you can do is try to play it safe sometimes.
I also think there's also risk in doing something hasty when you're winning.
Never interfere with your opponent when he's in the process of committing suicide. I mean, wisdom is knowing what. There are contradictory wisdom keys or cliches, right? The early bird gets the worm, but is it curiosity killed the cat? Or fools rush in, I guess would be a better.
Biden has a strategy here. I mean, his strategy he's been doing since the convention, which is run on. I mean, it's not total hiding. He's putting his own character front and center. This is a character-based campaign. It's not a 10-point plan campaign. He's contrasting his character with Trump's. He's not going out there doing a ton of interviews, which provides more opportunity to put the spotlight on him and off of Trump. So the negatives of Trump stay front and center in the media. And he is signaling as much as possible to undecideds and independents and Republicans that he is going to be a president that will take their views into account. I mean, one of the things he said more than once is that I'm the Democratic nominee, but I'm not going to be a Democratic president. I'm going to be an American president. I mean, that might sound like saccharine, empty rhetoric, but I think there is some.
Not if he starts going to Texas and.
But that's why the advice, the strategic advice I would give for him, that what he's not doing is to have a travel schedule that matches your strategy.
Howard Dean would approve, I think. Bill, we've already talked longer than we were supposed to, but you have a tweet. You got a tweet. A question directed at you on Twitter.
One of our fans asked us to talk about why is it that Biden showed strength with seniors before coronavirus. I mean, some people thought simply just the threat of them dying is enough to bring them to Biden. But I wrote in March in a Real Clear Politics column that Biden was showing strength with seniors back then. This was before the lockdowns. I was on that early, and I do think it is not strictly pandemic related. Part of it is just him being a senior himself, I suspect, and one who is personifying nostalgic times, personifying the way things used to be, which is something I think a lot of seniors have. A young voter hears about the good old days, thinks they're bad old days. Older voters, by and large, white older voters at least, don't see it that way. Biden has consistently not been tugged by the party's more ideologically harsh base, and that is appealing to older voters. And that's why it's hard for Trump to attack him as a Trojan horse for the left, because I think a lot of older voters don't see him that way. They see him as a bulwark against that. So that's my own take on it.
Trying to keep my computer from dying.
Oh, okay. You talk to your mother. You talk to other seniors in West Virginia, I assume. Do you have a similar sense?
I don't know why seniors were trending toward Biden early on, except to say, I think Trump has tried to create this false narrative that he was coasting to victory until this Chinese plague upset everything. And the truth is, I think it was more of a competitive race than what he's engaging in is a bit of revisionist history. I think it was more of a competitive race than he wants us to remember. I don't know why seniors. I can tell you, I had lunch with Mom yesterday. She the only takeaway from that is her sense that the media would have, if Trump had sounded the alarm about coronavirus early on, say like in February, that the media would have attacked him for causing panic and shutting things down and all that, which I think there's probably an element of truth to that. What I said was, I think any president should assume that there's going to be opposition, and whatever they do, they'll be second guessed and criticized for doing, and then you still have to do the right thing, And so I will concede the media bias point, but I don't think that's an excuse for Trump's behavior. But that doesn't answer your question or the tweeter's question about why Trump is doing. I mean, maybe it is.
But even your mom, who she's probably not voting for Biden.
I think she's not going to vote at this point.
Right. She is clearly very conservative, but she doesn't have nearly the same antipathy and fear of Biden as she did with Hillary.
Yeah, I think that's so much of this. I don't think it's just with seniors. Maybe there's people who have just been frankly old enough to have been around the Clintons for 30 years may have stronger feelings about the Clintons. But I do think that one of the huge differences between 2020 and 2016 is simply that the animosity toward Hillary Clinton was much greater than the animosity toward Joe Biden. And in fact, Joe Biden is so well liked that you basically have to invent a scenario that he's an empty vessel, that he's actually not going to be the president, in order to make voting for Trump, seem more palatable.
I mean, whenever I get a bunch of Trumpers in my Twitter feed, it's a lot of Biden at the debate's going to be such a disaster. People are going to see what an empty vessel that he is. And I don't know if you watched the press conference he gave yesterday. I mean, if that's your expectation, I think you're going to be very badly shocked at what happens. Biden might have a gaffe, might have more than one gaffe, but he's not totally out to lunch. Like, he is perfectly capable of talking about basic policy stuff.
He doesn't even know what state he's in, Bill.
I mean, I think some of the hardcore, what Biden haters are out there, that's what they believe. And they're just setting a really low bar for this guy.
Yeah.
And I think it's not going to work out for them now, of course.
But that goes back to a central theme of this dialogue, which is that the debates are going to be really important.
Yeah, and that's why I think Biden is probably keeping the schedule light. I think he's doing a lot of prep. I think he wants to make sure he's got his facts straight. Biden's very prone to, saying million when he means a billion, or mixing up numbers and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So,
and there's a double standard, right? I mean, if Trump says something crazy or just wrong, that's just Trump being Trump. Mm-hmm. With Biden, I think he has more leeway than Hillary or a lot of other politicians. But I do think there's still a double standard. Biden will be more harshly judged if he gets things wrong than Trump will.
I don't know about that, but we will certainly see in short order. I do have to jump because I got kid-related things to take care of.
Well, I think we've given the people their money's worth, and I also think we've written your next column. So
I should flesh that out.
Bad. Not bad for a day's work.
That's true. All right, Matt.
And
I'll see you next week.
About to die too. Are we going to do the DMZ this week?
The Zoom?
The DM Zoom.
Yeah, we'll DM Zoom.
Okay.
We can figure out a time.
Yeah. But keep the questions coming. You could at DMZ Show might be a way. Follow DMZ Show on Twitter, at DMZ Show, or send them to Bill. That's the other thing. Flood his inbox. Just email him to Bill. And we'll see you next week.
All right. Take care.
Thanks.